what happens if we get another dysfunctional city council? Like, how do we work through that?
It's almost impossible.
It's almost impossible. We got to get out the vote.
You have to get out the vote. And because people, so I was on the city council for 7 years, and we didn't always agree on everything, but we could leave friends at the end of the day.
Hey guys, it's an election season. St. George City elections are the most important thing. We want you to go to votestg.com and find out who's running and what they stand for. See us all over Southern Utah in our voter information booth. We'll be at Digby's Market, Red Rock Bicycles, and the park. We'll see you out there. Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming back to the 435 podcast. I just wrapped up a great conversation with Mayor Randall of St. George City. We talked about the city council, what makes a great city council member. We talked about water. We talked about the 20-year plan that St. George is trying to identify to give us direction in the future. So we hope you enjoy the episode. Please make sure you go to votestg.com to find out all of the information about the local city council members that are running in this coming up election. The primaries are September 5th. You should be getting the ballot in the mail by August 15th. So if you haven't registered, make sure you register, vote.utah.gov to register. You can also go to votestg.com. There's a link to registration there as well. But get out the vote, everybody. Enjoy the episode. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you out there. One of the conversations I talked to Stacy Young about was just like trying to clean up zoning because there's so many different zones, but then there's overlays. You know, because we had this 20-year plan, and then over time, that 20-year plan gets watered down as developers come and ask for zone changes.
Well, and it's not just that either. It's different council members. Mm-hmm. You know, you'll have different council members come on. Like more than a few years ago, before my time on the council, you had a council member that was adamant that no high density housing downtown, and it was just to be single family residents. Mm-hmm. And then other council members come on board and they're like, no, we want to try out mixed use or different things like that.
Yeah.
So that's why things change, because you have different people on the council.
So you have the general plan, because a lot of people get confused. They don't quite understand how the zoning works. So the general plan is this roadmap. It's the long roadmap that the city comes up with. And then there's a zone layer that goes over the top that gives the details as to what you could do on each individual parcel. And then there was this, there were different overlays that happened. I think there was a RCC, was it RCC overlay?
They came up with a lot of different, so we're looking at a screen, but each
if you're just listening, we're looking at the 2040 vision, st.georgecity.org or sgcity.org.
Right. So each color is a different type. So you had like traditional neighborhood and different things like that. And what's hard is you've got 5 council members with 5 different opinions. Uh-huh. And so you get in a room and we were working at this time with a consultant to try and take all the ideas and mesh them together. Yeah. And that's hard to do. Mm-hmm. when you have some people that don't want to see any high density, some that are okay with a couple of stories but not 3 stories. You were there when we did Stacy Young's boutique hotel, mm-hmm. right?
Yep.
And I thought it was a great place for a boutique hotel.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have a lot of neighborhood right there. Right. There's a lot of commercial. And it's more modern looking, but do we build everything out of sandstone? Because that's what the pioneers did.
Right.
The new city hall will have a little bit of sandstone on it. Mm-hmm. Just because of where we're at. We are right downtown by the Tabernacle, by the Dixie Academy building, different things like that. But we're also going to modernize it some too. So with Stacy's project, I'm like, 3 stories to me isn't a high rise.
Right.
Like to me, What's your definition of a high rise?
I know we talked about this on Nextdoor. That was like the app at Nextdoor.
Yeah.
That was the thing. It's like we just have high rises everywhere, or skyscrapers. They said skyscrapers.
Skyscrapers.
Really? That was what was stated as for this boutique hotel. It's like the trees are taller than what I think this project is being planned at. You know, I would say a high rise building is probably 10 stories or larger, right? Like that's a high rise.
See, and that's kind of what I think too.
Yeah.
That is a high rise.
Yeah.
You look at the hospital, you know, they're 5 stories, and you look at some of the buildings at Utah Tech. You look around at, well, Danielle, Councilwoman Larkin brought up a great point when we were talking about the boutique hotel. Her home's 2 stories downtown, but it's the same height as this 3 stories because she has a gable roof.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's kind of all in the eye of the beholder. And so that's what's hard when you're working on a master plan. So we have the downtown master plan done.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, okay, this is done. It needs to be codified now, put into ordinance, put on the books. Now, any council can come along and change things later on if they'd like. But now working on the general plan for 20 years for the whole community is a bigger bite to take out.
Yeah.
So when I look, like I wasn't on the council when Little Valley was developed.
And it went from, because it was like in 1980 to 2000 to 2020. And then 2020 was supposed to set another 20, right? That's kind of like been the daisy chain of it.
You try to go out 20 years just to have a plan in place, and anybody can come in and ask for a zone change if they don't like the zone. And we have a lot of placeholders, what we call them. So, you know, it could be zoned to open space. It's just a placeholder, or R110 where you know. Okay, so a good example. You're familiar with Popeye's Chicken and the development going across the street on George Washington Boulevard. That's really hard for me to.
It's a new one.
1450.
Yeah.
All where they're building that new development was all zoned R110.
Okay.
So would you want a single family house right there?
No.
Of course not.
Of course not. Yeah.
You would not. It's for commercial.
Right.
Commercial fits the very best right there.
Right.
So people can always come in and we can change the zone, but that was just put in place as a placeholder a long time ago. And
it was easy when everything was fields and agriculture. You're just like, okay, well, you know, there's going to be some houses here and maybe we'll do some commercial here, but you don't quite know what's going to take off before another thing, right? You know, Southgate, you know, looking back at the old 20-year plan, it's funny because they had like Southgate being a big portion of it. They had, it was almost like the remnants of Bloomington were in that zone, right? Where they were trying to like see, okay, how are these, you know, different developments going to expand and spill over, but you never really know what's going to take off and what's going to, you know.
Well, and a lot of people don't know that Bloomington and Bloomington Hills weren't even part of St. George when they were first developed.
Oh, I didn't know that.
No.
Okay.
They were annexed into the city in...
Oh, that makes sense.
In, I think, the early 80s.
That makes sense because on the MLS, on the Washington County Board of Realtors, the MLS, Bloomington was like a separate... It was almost a separate city in some of the like classifications.
It had its own council and everything.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And they still have a Bloomington council that meets to more for beautification and different projects. Like they take care of that roundabout right there, the big main roundabout
right there,
in Bloomington.
Brigham,
Brigham and Pioneer. And they do all the Christmas lights on there and everything. That's kind of what the Bloomington Council does. But I live in Bloomington Hills, and it was annexed into the city when we built our first home in 89. But before that, it wasn't.
Yeah.
And so the streets weren't built by the city. Nothing was put in by the city. So,
but that's also why there's no curb and gutter in a lot of it. There's no street lights. There's, you know, it doesn't have the typical infrastructure that you'd see in a master planned or a larger development that has city support, you know, on its infrastructure. Because if you look at Desert Color or, you know, Black Ridge Cove, they had all the infrastructure was like in place before anything was built up before. And that was because the city goes in and says, hey, there's some rules and ways this thing needs to be set up before you can, get, the permits to start building.
On my cul-de-sac, all the neighbors, we just leave our porch lights on all night. That's
your street light. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I'm in Ivins and I love the dark sky. I like that we don't have a lot of street lights, obviously as the population gets bigger and it's a public safety issue and some things like that. But that makes a lot of sense with Bloomington. So looking at the 20-year plan forward, really you have the expansion of Desert Color and SR7. Like that's really the biggest bulk of land that's really left in St. George, right?
Yeah, it is. You've got Davario that's still building out. And then, of course...
But that's pretty much just going to be homes, essentially, right? There's going to be a little commercial, but...
There's going to be some commercial. And so that's why I think when Little Valley was first developed, it was all fields, and then homes started coming in, and some people proposed some commercial out there, and then the neighbors were just up in arms. But imagine if there was a commercial area in Little Valley.
Yeah.
When people talk about the traffic, the key to traffic in St. George is having neighborhood commercial in different places. You don't have to run clear across town to go to the grocery store to get some gas or whatever.
Right.
So they messed up in Little Valley.
Well, like even just like restaurants and some, some of the basic essentials, right, that people are having to go out, not necessarily a full-blown grocery store. I can see how there's a certain size population that you need before that commercial can go in, right? It's a chicken and the egg situation, right? It's like, well, we need people there so we can have the commercial, but the commercial's kind of have to set aside.
Exactly. Set it aside. Because even just a little bit of commercial they have right there, that like the creamery and
Crimson Corner.
Yeah, it's busy.
I think it was Stacy Young that brought up, like, what if there was like a little cute little main street somewhere in Little Valley that was, like you could go park and walk around. Like, how cool would that be?
It would be awesome.
Yeah. And so thinking about how do we take what little land we have left, I was talking to Mayor Staley about how the Swiss, how it was like his uncle or something came here. He's like, you guys are building houses all over your farmland. He's like, we would never do that. You're building houses where now if you want to grow something, you have no place to grow it. You just go build houses in the hills like normal people, right? And that was like the mindset. And I thought that was an interesting idea because we really are, we have a lot of cliff sides and hillsides, and we've built houses all over our fields. And so I tend to look at what we've done in the Little Valley and the fields and think, okay, well, what do we got left? And then how do we try not to make those mistakes? So I can imagine, looking down 20 years, it's tough. It's a tough job to do.
So Mayor Staley and I are related. Did you know that?
I'm not surprised, but I didn't know that.
We share the same great-great-great-grandfather.
Okay.
Who came here in 1861.
Okay.
And settled Santa Clara.
Yeah.
So we're both Swiss and we have that blood running through us. But what's so sad to me about the fields is you did have farmers that just wanted to farm out there. Mm-hmm. And then they get old and they die, and then the kids come in and they're like, we don't want to farm anymore. And so then they sell off the land or they develop it, so you don't have a lot of farmland left out there.
Yeah. Well, and I was even looking at, how do we look at sustainability in our county? How do we get more local? How do we improve infrastructure to help give us be not so reliant on, outside communities? Because we're a desert island, right? We have, an hour and a half one way. You have basically 4 hours going the other way to get to a metropolitan city where, if trucks stop coming, growing food, it's not an option.
3 days we're out of food.
3 days we're out of food, right? And so, is that something that we would want to look at and say, hey, can we do a better job at being more sustainable within our county? Or do we just say, hey, it's not an option for us, and we just got to make sure that if something bad happens, we all have an exit strategy?
That's right.
But, it's a tough thing to do. And then priorities, right? It just depends on the priorities of the community at the time, right? In the community at the moment. Looking down 20 years, where do you guys start? You had a consultant come in and helped you with the downtown plan. Is that same consultant kind of helping you through the rest, or how do you guys do that?
They were helping us, and then the council decided that they didn't like the direction that the consultant was going. So now it's just up to staff. And that is a big job.
It's a big job.
It's a big job.
We're the fifth largest city in Utah by population. Mm-hmm. And we're one of the fastest growing cities in the country.
Always.
And we have more projects and the need for expertise than we can home grow. So it seems like we would want an expert from out of the area. Have they said we don't like the way that expert was thinking, or it's like, hey, we just want to do it ourselves? Is that kind of the thought?
They thought that.
You're thoughtful with your words, and
I know,
I appreciate that.
I'm trying to be nice. They didn't like the direction the expert was going. They thought that they were too liberal and progressive in their thinking for long term. Mm-hmm. And we have some council members that would love to go back in time. Mm-hmm. And that train has left the station. I've been here since 78. Mm-hmm. And tiny town. Yeah. And it was fun. Everybody knew each other. It was great to grow up, but you couldn't make a living here. Very few people did. And once you went and got a degree, you had to leave town to do anything with that degree. So, yeah, would it be great to have Dick's Cafe back on the boulevard? Yeah, but it's just not going to happen. Drive-in movie theater or drive-up movie theater, and hey, that was fun in the summertime.
It was fun. And I grew up. I grew up in Salt Lake, so I was born in Sandy, and it wasn't really a small town. But then I went to a military school in Roswell, New Mexico. So for high school, we had one Walmart. There was 2 movie theaters, but there was like 5 screens total, right, with those 2 movie theaters. Yeah. It was a small town, and looking at the population at the time, St. George and Roswell were pretty close. But St. George has exploded over the last 15 years, and 10 to 15 years just on a train, a runaway train.
I think COVID did more to bring more people here than we could have possibly dreamed of.
And the interesting thing, too, is I keep hearing that people feel like, oh, well, we're building way more than we ever have. But when you look at the actual permits and you look at the actual completion of dwellings, we're not actually all that fast in comparison to the early 2000s. We were doing more building in the early 2000s. It's just that in the early 2000s, the demand wasn't there. A lot of places were just sitting empty, which is why the market crashed.
Right.
And so we have demand, and the people are filling them up as we're building them. So it does feel like there's a little bit of a runaway train. So I can understand the fear and the feeling of like, how do we pump the brakes on this? What do you think are some solutions to slowing it down? Not necessarily stopping it. Do you see benefit in slowing it down? Do you think
I think there is a benefit in slowing it down, and it's kind of naturally happened right now because of interest rates and different things like that. Mm-hmm. So we are seeing a decline, but still not anything to worry about.
Right.
I mean, there's still tons of work to do.
Yeah.
But it's like, how do you stop people from moving here?
Or how do you stop private landowners from wanting to go put a boutique hotel up on their property that they know is going to get filled up? Right. And I would rather have a hotel than any more short-term rentals. Like if we could just stop with the short-term rentals, right? I'm in that camp. We
have over 2,000 illegal short-term rentals in St. George.
On top of the ones that are legal.
Yep.
On top of the ones that are legal.
On top of the ones that are legal. And the state legislature really tied our hands a few years ago. So we used to be able to go on the Airbnb sites or different sites and book something.
Yeah.
And then go after them that way. We can't even look now.
Yeah.
You're not even allowed to look.
You can't. It's kind of a funny thing is you put these handcuffs on the people that are meant to try and enforce the rules that we have, but there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to that.
Because think if all those houses were freed up for even rentals, long-term rentals.
Long-term rentals, yeah.
There's one in my cul-de-sac. Here's just kind of a quick example.
Oh yeah, so Jeff gets fired up about this one.
Yeah, they put the burden on me.
Right.
Because, there's kids playing in the cul-de-sac, my kids, and, I've got my own personal reasons set aside, but they put the burden on me to catch the people like walking in and out, and I've got to video them, and I've got to send the link in, and it's virtually impossible to get. I think I've seen the city, one of those little city cars swing by every now and again, but I mean, I've just kind of given up because it's almost impossible to.
You got to catch them red-handed, right?
Yeah, like I don't want to walk up to somebody and be like, "Hey, did you book this on Airbnb? Like, you shouldn't be doing that." It's like, well, I'm not blaming them; they're the ones that booked it, Right. So, anyway,
my daughter, she lives on a cul-de-sac as well, and my youngest daughter, and the neighbors right across the street from her were renting the back portion of their house. They kind of turned into an apartment on Airbnb. Well, this couple from Germany rented it. And then he went out and got totally drunk that night and came back. Thank goodness an Uber brought him back. But he couldn't remember where they were staying. And he ended up in the backyard of a house 2 homes down trying to get in their house. And this home is owned by a man and a lady who have 5 daughters. And the guy went out with a baseball bat and beat the crap out of him.
Oh my gosh. He's lucky you didn't shoot him.
He is very lucky you didn't shoot him. And that, now they're renting long term.
Yeah.
They quit the Airbnb thing.
Yeah, maybe we shouldn't do that.
So,
the Germans like to party, apparently.
So it's really hard and my daughter was upset about it because she's got 3 little kids. And she said, you never know who's going to be across the street.
Yeah. And going to the short-term rental, I almost feel... You almost feel for the city council of old that didn't see this coming, because who would have seen it coming, right? Like, this thing is going to catch on, and it's everywhere. But it's all over places that are destination areas, right? And it's an opportunity to make money. And in some cases you can make money. In some cases you don't actually even turn that great of a profit because of the cost and damage.
I saw a funny. Sorry to cut you off, but I saw a funny meme about. If there was some way to short Airbnb hosts, I would do it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, just short them where you could bet on this one is definitely not going to last very long.
Bet on them failing.
Yeah, because a lot of them do end up failing. And I think there's some resorts that have done a really good job. I like Paradise Village. I think they did a great job. There's certain communities that have done, it's almost like a timeshare type thing, like Las Palmas has done.
Right, and you know what you're getting.
You know
if
exactly
you
what
buy
you're
up
getting.
there, you know what you're getting.
And there's the commercial aspect as an investment goes, that you can kind of predict something out and you can get a return on your investment on those things. We talked about this on the last housing market episode that we did, was if you want a vacation rental that supplements some income, maybe that's a good market. But if you're going to buy something as a vacation rental just to make money in Southern Utah, that's dried up. So going back to what you'd said about, the market has changed some things for us. How do we now take this opportunity, this little window of time, and put things in place that'll help guide us down that road, which is why I'm so interested in that 20-year plan and how they move it forward. So do they meet, when they're talking about the 20-year plan, do they have like a goal of figuring this out by this date, or are we waiting through the election? What is it?
Good question. So when we were doing the downtown master plan, we brought a lot of different community stakeholders in. And so we would meet, it was weekly, and it was via Zoom, so people could join in wherever they were, and came up with this plan. And it wasn't just city council members. In fact, there could only be 2 council members on that committee because 3 would make a quorum.
Right.
And so, and I thought they did a really good job of all coming together and doing this. And I think we need to continue on, especially where we don't have the expert now. I mean, our community development director is an expert, but think of all the balls he has in the air.
Yeah.
Just with development in general.
Yeah.
To now sit down and go over the whole general plan for the entire city.
Yeah.
So
you start to stretch resources really thin, right? And then when you're dealing with a budget, that even though it feels like this massive number, at the end of the day, those dollars and cents, they go pretty fast, right? And you're like,
do.
when you hire on personnel and we bring on added support to help manage this, it's the it's the fifth largest by population city in the entire state. We're not a small town. I think that idea, that mentality has to get put to the side. I know it feels like a small town and we want to keep it that way, but
Right.
it's not. I'm interested. I didn't realize that they had scrapped having the expert, support them in that. So that'll be an interesting conversation as I move forward. So,
And I was really disappointed they did, because I thought it freed up so many resources on the city's shoulders.
Mhm.
And they didn't have the final say. Just because you hire an expert to come in doesn't mean, they get all the power, and they're taking all the power away from the legislative body, which is the city council. In the end, they have the final say.
yeah, I think the goal of that expert should be to continue to craft something. If they're not getting the feedback from the city council that they think they should be able to craft it and get in a direction that would solve some of the future problems, be able to look down the road and say, hey, this is going to be a problem. We might not have the problem now, but let's definitely look at this perspective, and then also craft it with the personality types that are on that council. But it's not going to always be that council, like you just said, right? They're not going to always feel that way about, low density residential being all over downtown. Stacey Young, we keep bringing him up. He might as well just be on the podcast at this point. But he said if we took the whole population of the county and we gave it the same density as Paris, France, which granted that's an extreme example. He said we could fit the entire county from the Dixie Hill to the freeway. You could fit everybody in that one little spot if we did the same density as Paris, France. And that to me was like, and then we'd have just open space everywhere, and everybody could just walk around, and we'd have farms, we'd have all kinds of stuff. Going through that thought exercise, I was like, man, that's pretty amazing, and also leaves room for, hey, there's a big jump between here and Paris, France, right? What does that look like? What is the quality of life look like? I want dark sky.
You can't deprive people of their 14,000 square foot homes and 5-acre lots
with massive swimming pools.
How dare you?
How dare you, sir? How dare you?
Well, and then I see, there was a listing. There's like 12 1-acre lots out there by Crimson, by the new high school. All 12 1-acre lots for $650,000. That's the starting one for the smaller of the 1-acre lots.
But they'll sell.
Maybe. I'm still, the jury's out on my belief on whether that's going to sell or not. But you think of like all those massive homes.
Hey, what about that wakeboard park out there? I don't know for sure, but there was one lot left. Is what they're saying for $2.5 million.
Are you serious?
That's right on the boat, like the boat.
Yeah,
loop.
it's on the boat park. Yeah, it's.
Have you seen that out in Hurricane yet?
And
it's already going.
I think it's 0.7 acres. It's not even an acre lot for $2.5 million. So
$2.5 million.
Just
That's just a start. Not even put a house on. It is insanity.
You know what I bought my lot for that my house is currently on?
$75,000.
$18,000.
18. The Dixie Spring lots, because of the impact fees, you had to pay like $20,000 in impact fees. But in 2010 or 11, it was like right towards the bottom. They were selling for $1,200. $1,200 a quarter acre.
My oldest son and his wife live in Dixie Springs.
Yeah.
The only thing I told them is that they needed like a kayak and a 72-hour kit just in case.
Just in case that
dam breaks.
That dam breaks. There are a lot of people say that. Yeah,
that's a well-built dam.
It's a well-built.
Did you know Dixie Springs is not even in a FEMA flood zone? Did you know that?
That does not surprise me.
I didn't know that.
I know. I had a client one time that was like, "It's got to be in a flood zone." So I looked it up real quick, and maybe it's changed since, but it wasn't that long ago. It's not even in a flood zone.
Wow, that's pretty fascinating. I didn't know that the reservoir is carrying as much water underneath the sand as it is above. And I was like, sand hollow. Oh, that's why they call it sand. It's like a hollow, and the sand is holding all the water. I thought that was fascinating.
It is very fascinating, and water in general is very fascinating.
Yeah, we've talked about water a lot. What from the Washington County Conservancy District put out their 20-year plan, which is great. It's coinciding perfectly with the 20-year plan that hopefully St. George, knowing that we've reached our. We've reached the reliable yield we're at the threshold of a reliable year. We can count on this much water moving forward. Every permit after 2023 that gets approved is outside of that reliable year yield. And we have a couple of years as a gap until we can get the reuse water system online. 2023 above the average reliable yield. See if you could pull it up, Jeff. So the average reliable yield. So this isn't saying that we're out of the water. Anybody that gets put online after that, the assumption would be, let's say we go 2 more years of a really heavy drought. We don't conserve the water the way we did this last year. We could start getting into a real thin. We're getting really thin because we only have like 2 or 3 years. If you pull up I wish I would have had it on deck, but the actual 20-year. Go down,
I have the
go to resources, presentations, right there, and then I think they had. Oh, sorry. Go back one.
Do you know if we had
to reports
Warner Valley built, we could have filled it this year, just with the runoff?
I know.
Doesn't that make you sick?
It does make me sick. I told Jeff, the Santa Clara River had broke the dam like in the late 1800s, like 7 years out of 10. The dam kept breaking, right?
Yeah.
And I thought, if this was back then, every man, woman, and child that was of working age would be out there with a shovel.
Yes,
like we're all going out there to do it. I was like, can we just get everybody together and just go create a reservoir?
No, because now you have a BLM.
But yeah, now we have all these.
Then.
That's true.
And that's what's holding us up.
Yeah, so that's the county currently using more than 90% of its annual reliable water supply. So we have like this yield. So going back to it, and we can find it later, but after 2023, we're officially above our yield, what the average reliable yield is. It's continuing. We've had pretty wet summer still, right? We're getting monsoons. That's going to be helpful. It's not great, but
we need to still keep praying for water.
Keep praying for water. I was so happy the governor said did a day of thanks for God giving us the water, because that was awesome.
You totally not a change of subject, but do you know how many people mocked him?
I know that. I said this on one of my first episodes too. I was like, we got mocked for that, and then we all prayed and it rained. It legitimately worked.
Like biggest snowpack we've had for ages, and so I went back to DC in March, and that's one thing I talked to every congressional delegate about.
He gets mocked pretty often.
Oh, he does. He does. And
I can't imagine is there a politician that isn't getting just hammered?
No.
Over the last, it's been like 5 years, every politician is getting hammered.
And how are you going to get good people to want to run for anything?
That's a great statement. How can we expect somebody who cares and is genuinely trying to do a good job to want to go throw their name in the hat if, this thing that they said 2 years ago just gets drudged up and dumped on them? It makes it really difficult.
It does.
There's a moment of reckoning. I'm hoping that everybody can just, give everybody the grace that we all kind of deserve, I think.
But we got mocked on trying to get people to conserve. And I'm like, why is that such a hard concept? So when we were talking about conserving, because the state allows 0.89 acre feet per home. Mm-hmm. Well, St. George's average is about 0.78. And on new builds, that's 0.54 now. Mm-hmm. And so the city has done so much on our own that we've gotten accolades from the governor's office of we're taking out turf that isn't being used. I mean, and I think all the LDS churches need to do it. They need to go to all zero-scape, because do you ever see anybody on a lawn at a church?
No.
You don't?
No.
They're just there for show.
I'm glad you said that. I was thinking that the other day. I'm glad you said that, because there's certain institutions where the government you can't force people to do stuff. We can only, lead by example.
Right.
And I would say St. George City has for sure done a good job on leading by example on that, with the exception of the golf courses. But we'll talk about that in a minute. We'll go back to that later.
Okay.
But
this is something on the golf courses. So, we started in the rough, as that's what it's called. I'm not a golfer. My dad and my husband would be so disappointed right now.
It's all right.
But we planted the tall fescue in the rough. And we were getting a lot of complaints. It's so ugly. And it was. until it grows to a decent height, it looks like the ugly teenage years.
Yeah, yeah.
But it only has to be watered like once every 4 to 5 days.
Right.
And so they did that, and they removed a lot of turf that wasn't needed on the golf courses. So from 2020 to 2021, the golf courses saved 88.5 million gallons of water.
That's pretty good.
Just by doing that.
That's pretty good.
And I should have called Colby for the latest numbers. But in 2022, the whole city saved 400 million gallons less water, even though we added 1,300 connections.
That's the thing where I would really say we've led the way.
Aren't there some golf courses too that have their own reuse system? Like they use the non-potable water, or is that not true?
Not outside of St. George, I don't know. All of our golf courses are on the reuse system in St. George. So we'll get flack when we tell people to water from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. And then if they see a park being watered in the middle of the day or a school, well, that's reuse water. And you just have...
Yeah, it's water that would have gone down the river anyway.
Yeah, don't drink that water.
Yeah.
Don't drink
we
that water.
may have to in the future,
Okay, so I'm not going to go too far off the side of water specifically and reuse, because there's an infrastructure thing in play that coincides with the GO bond. And maybe I'll just dive into this because it was something I brought up to one of the city council members the other day. It's not that I'm against the GO bond and what we can do with that money. I'm not against that. And I love the parks. And I'm a citizen of Ivan, so I love it because it doesn't even cost me any money to take advantage of all these things, right? Which is great because St. George has always taken the lead where they've paved the way for the bonuses that you get for living in the surrounding areas, right? Santa Clara and Ivans and Washington, they've gotten the bonuses of what St. George has sacrificed in a lot of different ways. But knowing that we're in an economic situation, if you forecast the national economy out a little ways, you look at the value of the dollar, you look at what bond and the interest rates are doing. A lot of the bond that was passed last time, they got the benefit of having a pretty low interest rate because historically bond rates were really low over that 29-year period of time. Looking forward, is that going to be the case? Is it possible that bond interest rate, is it fixed? Maybe I'm misunderstanding that.
This bond, we will not have a payment. The payment will be the exact same amount as the former bond.
Even if interest rates go up?
Yes.
Okay. So there's a fixed interest rate that goes along with bond. Okay. So that's helpful in understanding it. So what my thought though was, is there something similar that we could do where we have parks, we have recreation right now, we have trails. Is this an opportunity where we're going to not have to pay for this money that we've paid for over the course of the last 30 years? We kind of have this gap. Could we use some money in reinvesting in infrastructure, whether it's water treatment facility that'll help us down the road on water, maybe a public transportation project that would help add jobs, but also alleviate some of the traffic needs, or even maybe an energy sector project. I had Lori Mangum on here, and it was one of my favorite conversations, which she thought it was lame, like nobody wants to talk about this, but I was fascinated with the way power works and buying and selling it. But going back to what I'm really interested in is how self-reliant can we be? How many things can we as a community put into place to where we're not reliant on what's happening up north or what's happening in Ukraine, because now all of a sudden our electric bill is 3 times more, but we don't get control over that.
So the good thing with the reuse, with water, with energy, that's all in an enterprise fund.
Okay.
And that they fund themselves because you can bill for that. Okay. That's on your monthly bill every month. If you're on St. George Power, you're billed for that. You have a storm drain fee. You have,
So the citizens already pay for those things.
You're already paying for those things. Uh-huh. And so they have a huge pot of money that they use to do projects, expansion, all of that kind of stuff. The thing with the GO bond, because some people are saying, well, just take the money that we would spend on the bond each year and put it into public safety. the whole thing to me is we've got some parks out there that have playground equipment that it's almost 30 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I told you this story. So when the property tax increase didn't pass, we had to go through line item and just go through and slash and burn different projects. One of the
Ron Swanson. He went Ron Swanson and
Yes.
just slash and burn.
And one of the things that we cut out was new playground equipment for the South Bloomington Hills Park, which is now called the Redwood Tree Park. And so we took the playground equipment out because it was starting to injure kids. Kids were getting hurt on it. And the Parks Department said, this is a liability.
Yeah.
We just got to pull it. So they pulled out the playground equipment. And then what happened is there's no lights in that park. That park, when it was first built, was to be a night sky park because there was no homes around it. And now there's a lot of homes around it. So it's not
Less
really
night sky.
Less night sky. And we took the playground equipment out, and then it was dark. And so then the seedy part of society started moving in. Drug deals were happening down there left and right. And then we had right there at the park, a car pulled up. Somebody caught it with the ring cam. And it was a drug deal. And there were 4 guys, 2 went on each side of the car, walked up to the driver and just started shooting the car. And the driver was shot 6 times. He lived. But after that, the neighbors were like, what have you done to us?
Yeah.
And so I called Lori Mangum and I said, can you get with Liddell Lobb? Because our area is on Dixie Power. Can we get lights up in there? At least let's get lights up to light it up.
Yeah.
And within 2 weeks, they had lights in that park.
Wow.
And then our RAP taxes came in higher than we had projected. So we were able to take money from RAP tax and get some new playground equipment. And that was put in, and that park just opened last week or 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I saw that.
And the neighbors are just thrilled. So you can use park impact fees on a new park or a brand new trail or something like that. But replacement has to come out of the general fund. So to me, it's kind of 6s. If you take that money that we're paying toward the bond and say, let's put it all into public safety, you're still going to have to take money out of your general fund to replace a lot of this aging playground equipment that we have.
Maybe I misunderstood. I thought on the presentation the other day, it said that the money could not be used as maintenance. The GEO bond money could not be used towards maintenance.
It can be used to replace playground equipment.
Okay.
And it can be used to...
But it can't be used to like pay the landscaper. It can't be used to...
No, it won't be used for any salaries.
Okay.
Anything like that.
Okay.
But it can be used to...
have assets.
Fix trails, to put in new trails.
Okay.
Part of that bond, they want to put $4 million into the Sun Bowl so that it will be used year round instead of just during the rodeo.
Can we make it like 8 million and make it like just huge and awesome? Because
Right?
it's such a great location,
It is
and we have
such a
Utah
great
Tech, but it's like,
location.
can we get a couple of different venues? And,
Well, it will put bleachers in there instead of the hard concrete
Yeah.
cement. And then they want to put post-tension concrete in the bottom so that you can do pickleball in there. You can do roller hockey in there.
Okay,
Because you can always add dirt for the rodeo.
Right,
and
right.
take it out.
Oh, that makes sense. That's cool.
And do concerts or whatever you want in there.
And Vernon Wortham Park and that park, it's a central, we have Town Square, but that park is packed all the time. It's used.
An amazing park.
It's an amazing
huge.
park. And then if you go back to that 20-year plan and you look at the lively zones, which, if I was doing this, I'd be like, can we double the size of the lively zone? The opportunity for population density to grow out there and the use of those parks, it really, thinking of what lively really is. Can you zoom in there? Where's Vernon Wortham Park in reference to that? Can you zoom into that?
I see Tabernacle, 400 South.
What's that white building? 100 South there. Maybe not.
Vernon Wortham's on 400 South.
Yeah, so it doesn't quite go all the way there because it looks like it only goes down just barely to 100 South.
There's Flood Street.
Yep. So it looks like the park is in that transitional, the green. There's 400 South. I guess it'd be just...
Isn't it in the green?
Yeah, go right there. I think it's right there.
Yeah.
I think that's where the park is.
I'm wondering if
Yeah,
that
Sun
white
Bowl.
is the school.
That white's the school. Yep. Sun Bowl is just north of that. Yep. So right there. So, looking at, the lively, we could go down Flood Street, I feel like, but that's okay. I get that we're dealing with the city council that we have right now. They don't mesh well. They don't. And if you watch and you listen in on a regular basis, you can tell that it seems like not everybody's on the same page, which is unfortunate. I'm hoping this election, whether there's, obviously all three incumbents are running.
They are.
There's going to be the chances of there being turnover are, I think, pretty high at this point, considering there's 16 people in the race right now. But what happens if we get another dysfunctional city council? Like, how do we work through that?
It's almost impossible.
It's almost impossible. We got to get out the vote.
You have to get out the vote. And because people, so I was on the city council for 7 years, and we didn't always agree on everything, but we could leave friends at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And nobody was trashing other people. It was a cohesive group.
Mm-hmm.
And we were all there for one reason, because we love St. George.
Yeah.
I mean, I love this city. All 4 of my kids, I'm fortunate enough that they all 4 live here. I have 11 grandkids. They're all here.
That's awesome.
Well, one's in Santa Clara, one's over in Hurricane.
They're all here.
They're here.
Yeah.
And so they're close. And I think I told you this when we were talking privately, but when I was at the 4th of July concert and the events down there, I had a lady come up to me, and because they asked me to just speak, and I did like 40 seconds of,
Yeah.
Happy 4th of July. We're glad you're here, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And so she came up to me after and she said, "Are you the mayor?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "I want to tell you something." She said, "My husband and I are here visiting from Texas." And she said, "Your city reminds me so much of the town I grew up in Alabama." She said, "Even though you have a large population, it still feels so quaint, and it's so clean and friendly." And she said, "It feels safe." And she said, "I just love it." She said, "We will come back to visit a lot." And that's what you want. Even though you're growing, you still want people to feel safe in your community. You want them to feel like everyone's welcome. And you need a council that feels that way too, that, we can like each other. We might not agree on everything, but...
What do you think about expanding the size of the city council?
I don't know if we're ready to have like a 7 council. Even cities larger than ours mostly just have 5.
Mm-hmm.
I think the county commission could use 5 county commissioners instead of 3.
I'm very surprised that we only have 3 on that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised at that.
Yeah.
I've thought a lot about what their role is too, and I probably need to bring a couple of them on too to get their perspective on, what is it that what's the county plan? Because it seems like St. George is kind of the leader and the county's over here in a supporting role. Where is that normal? It seems like the normal role is the county is going to take a little bit more of a lead role.
We've always had a really good relationship with the county, and they're over all the unincorporated areas, and so.
Which are not very many.
No, there's not very many, but there's still some. And that when people complain about ordinances and different things in the city, I'm like, when you move into a municipality, you need to know what you're moving into.
Yeah.
That you agree to follow some rules.
Yeah.
The person next door to me, I don't want him to run an auto shop out of his home,
right,
because I'm in a residential area.
Yeah.
But now if you move up to Vail, you can pretty much do whatever you want.
Yeah.
So
well, and then I would listen to the last commissioners meeting, and they were going over the new rules for short-term rentals on the county level, and they've had to get excruciatingly detailed and minute as to what those rules are. A lot like a city has. So some of those things are going to change and evolve as time goes on, right? You get somebody that takes a liberal approach to what the rules are, and they try to, expand some things out. I've seen some massive houses in county land that they've turned them into basically resort compounds, right? Where they host, 25 families or whatever, and they do these big old events there. And in Leeds, for example, that kind of destroys the quality of life. If you're, you're a neighbor, but you're not like right next door, you could still see the chaos going on, or lights and music playing that echoes through the hills. If you choose to
live in somewhere like Leeds, you're choosing to be in a really quiet,
specifically for a reason. Yeah.
Secluded place. But so, yeah, this election, I'm nervous because there are so many candidates. I've never seen so many run before.
Yeah. We only had 2 drop out. It was started at 18, and then only two have dropped out. I've interviewed, I think I'm at 5 of them so far. Only 10 of them signed up for interviews because I had to put a deadline. I'm like, I'm going to run out of just airtime and availability to do it. So I think I'm going to only end up getting 10 interviews, even though the ballots are going to go out here pretty quick. I mean,
they're
we
mailed
got 15,
out on the 15th.
Yeah, 15 days. And I think this is going to air after, because I still have Jimmy Hughes' interview and Greg MacArthur's interview that I wanted to make sure that I got as many of these candidates, because those are longer interviews, not necessarily about their candidacy, but just their perspective on what's going on in the city.
Right.
And I wanted to give them some additional, not to give them an advantage or a disadvantage, but I wanted to make sure that they could be on the record for, what their thought process was. And I did the same thing with Danielle as well. Her episode came out last week, but so this one will come out after theirs. So the ballots will already be out by the time this comes out. So getting educated on who the candidates are, I think it's going to be really important. So before you finalize the checkbox, they got to be in a week before. When do they have? I guess you could drop them off the day of, which is September 5th. So you'll have plenty of time. You'll have the ballot in your hand. You'll be able to, do some research and understand the issues. VoteSTG.com is a website that I created that was trying to get all the candidates to be able to compare them. So I gave them 7 questions, and then you can click on each candidate and see how they answered all the questions to get the same question. So I only had 11 of them actually fill it out after texts and emails and like trying to get a hold of them. Like, hey, will you fill this out so I can, give people an equal spot. Ballotpedia. Have you ever looked up Ballotpedia?
No.
So Ballotpedia, they're kind of a similar organization of what I'm trying to just do at the local level, but they just give you, it's just kind of the straight facts on candidates, right? You're going to get this ballot in the mail. You can put your address in and say, hey, this is what's going to come up on the election. And they haven't been able to get to the local level yet. They namely stay at the federal level or a state level. But kind of the organization of their websites, what I'm trying to do for the city of St. George. And somebody came up in one of the public discussions on the budget, and they were, basically stating that they felt like the city should do a better job at, educating everybody on, what's happening. And my thought was like, well, it's not the city's job to employ, like Robert, what's his last name?
Myers.
Robert Myers. He did such a great job of like breaking down the budget, his presentation for the budget, not only just for the city council, but also for, just a citizen to go in and look and see the breakdown. I think he did a fantastic job at that. But that's not necessarily his job to educate the citizens. It's his job to educate the city council. We elected the city council to make the decisions on our behalf, right? But it was private organizations. It was the media's job to do that historically. But we don't have local media anymore. That seems to have disappeared. So this is what VoteSTG.com is what I'm trying to piece together, but it's on a shoestring budget. It's expensive. And I'm doing the WordPress. I'm not a website builder. I'm like doing it myself, trying to like nickel and dime this thing together. I'm like, no wonder nobody does this. It's so difficult to do.
I know.
But at the end of the day, getting the issues and the candidates in front of everybody is really important. So that's really what the kind of the goal of the podcast is.
And I think that's why a lot of people have said, why aren't there any forums or debates? Well, how do you do that with 16 candidates? I know the chamber's going to do like a meet and greet.
August 10th. August 10th is...
And tourism office is doing something as well. I think that's August 8th.
Okay.
But it's impossible with 16 candidates.
Yeah, and that's on the primary, right? And then once we get through the primaries...
Once you get through the primary, you're down to 6 people.
We're going to be down to 6, and then it's...
Then you get into the nuts and bolts of things.
Then we're going to really need to get in the nuts and bolts. So... We've been on for an hour. I'm gonna let you go. I appreciate you coming on. I hope we can keep going and do this again.
We can.
What do you want to leave everybody listening? What makes a good one last question? What makes a good city council member from your perspective? Being that you were on the council for how long?
7 years.
7 years, and then now sitting in the mayor's seat, where you're like, I don't have to vote now. I can just kind of just watch and guide.
No, this has been a lot more difficult. Believe me.
Okay, all right, that's fair enough. I missed that. That was fair enough. Fair enough.
Because you take all the blame for things that you don't even get to.
You're like, I didn't even vote. I didn't even say anything.
I know, but it's part of the job.
That's a good point.
A good city council person. Danielle Larkin is the epitome of a great city council person. Joe Bocut was the epitome of a great city.
I love Joe. I miss Joe.
Of a great city council person. They went to the events they were invited to. They responded to emails. They were open and listened to people that they may not agree with, but they listened. Mm-hmm. And that's the biggest key. Just listen. Mm-hmm. You don't have to get along with everybody or believe the same thing somebody else believes, but just listen to them. Mm-hmm. And read your packet thoroughly. We get those a week in advance. There is no reason you should come to a council meeting unprepared. Yeah. That you should know what we're going to be discussing, maybe have questions in advance that you have for the developer or staff or whoever. And that is a good city council person. Somebody that I try and pride myself to get back to every single person who calls or emails me. And that is a lot. I'm on, but I want them to feel heard, even if it's a nasty email. Mm-hmm. Well, there are a few that I've just delete because there's no reason to respond. But even if it's been somebody who's attacking me for something, I'll just say, thank you for emailing me. We're just going to have to agree to disagree on this, right. So that's a good city council person. I just want worker bees that want to work hard, that they're all assigned, besides being on the city council, they're all assigned to different boards. Mm-hmm. And that's because we all can't be everywhere. Right. So if you're on, let's say, a veterans board, or you're on the Switchpoint board or different things, bring that information back to us so we know. Mm-hmm. And I just think that's what a great city council person is. Okay. Well, I appreciate that. I think we'll make sure everybody gets that message. They need to hear that and know that it's a big job. It's a huge job. It's not something that should be taken lightly. If you don't have the spare time to do it, you should just respectfully decline and say, maybe this wasn't the best idea and I didn't think through this whole thing. But it's no longer just ribbon cuttings and kissing babies. Yeah, there's a lot. And I'll leave this final thought, this is why I'm a big advocate for smaller government, because there's only so much that we can control as it starts to grow. I appreciate that St. George has fought in a lot of ways from expanding the role of what the local government can do, and the conservative viewpoint. I definitely am in that camp, right? Slow and steady wins the race. We have a government affairs person. Sean Guzman used to be our city attorney. Mm-hmm. He is now our government affairs person. He spends every day up at the legislature fighting for us to keep the legislature, to let us continue to have local control. Yeah. We don't want to have some legislator from Salt Lake City dictating what we have to do here in St. George, or saying, we're going to take your zoning away. And we're going to come in and we're going to tell you, you have to put apartments here and here and here and here and here. Because they don't think we're building enough high density. Yeah. Even though we have so much on the books, we've done more high density homes. St. George and Washington City has done their part. It seems like Hurricane's on a better track. I can't say that of everybody else, though. They're not. I don't think they're doing quite enough on the high density side. And it's a tough balance. I can see where the local government is trying to be guided by its constituents, by the citizens. And that's kind of the way that it should be, is that we live in this neighborhood. The up north doesn't live in this neighborhood, right? We're dealing with a completely different mix of dynamics that I don't think any other city up north is dealing with. We don't have a metro to feed us. We don't have
we're on our own for a lot, basically everything. We're on our own, and they give us support when it comes to water. It seems like they've come around. They haven't historically.
No.
They didn't do enough. I would say the previous governorship did not do enough in pushing the Lake Powell pipeline forward the way it should have been done. And hopefully Governor Cox can get us back into a good position as the new rules of the Colorado Basin come up. But we're kind of sitting sideline watching that happen and unfold. The powers are out of our hands, but
that's what's unfortunate.
It is unfortunate. We don't have the control of our own destiny, which is rough.
No, we don't.
It's rough.
We just have to sit back and whatever the federal government hands us or the state government, then that's what we get.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, get out the vote. Michele, thank you. Mayor Randall, thank you for being here.
You're so very welcome.
I appreciate it.